Hello everyone, it's Angie here at Beads and Plenty More. Today I thought I'd show you this necklace done on this metal ring, and it's got these little beads stitched around it. And I've just put it on a leather cording. So to get started, I will post a full supply list at the end of the video, but we're working with these 2mm, these are hematite beads and they're faceted. I've got some size 11 beads here. I've also got some size 10 beads here. I'll talk about those in a minute. These are 3mm crystal rondelles, and this one actually comes as a mixed strand. And then these guys, these size 10s, I used them in the fringe on my second sample here, and I used these laser cut daggers at the bottom. So I didn't put a fringe on this first one here, but I thought I'd change it up and put a fringe on the second one. So I also want to show you a couple ways you can change this pattern up. This is a 4mm instead of a 3mm crystal, and these are size 8 seed beads, and that works just as well. Or if you can't find a ring like the one I've got, a ring like this will also work. You don't need to have a big fancy ring. So there's a couple of variations, but getting started here. Now I stitched the bottom already, and I will talk about how to do that, but I'm going to shoot across and I'm going to pick up the top. So what I've got is I've got about ½ meter of 6-pound fire line, and I've threaded a needle on each end. So I happen to know that I've got 21 beads of the 3mm crystal down here, and this is right in my middle here. I'm going to shoot directly across and go through the hole that's on the other side to create my top. So I'm matching my 2 needles up here, and we're going to take them through a bead. So one of these 3mm beads. And I want to keep them relatively in the same spot. So now I'm going to build out each way with the needles. So taking one of the 2mm hematite beads and one of the 3mm ones. And I'm going to come to the hole directly beside it, stitch through it, and then back up my bead. And not catch the fringe on the way. So we'll do that again. 2mm bead first. Now I found with these 3mm ones, I was hitting every hole. Like as I was working along, I was catching every hole that came along. I did find with the 4mm crystal that I could skip every second hole or so, and it sat just fine. So there's there's 4 that way, and let's do 4 the other way. I do need an even number on this top part just to get the hook to hang right. So I'm counting the 3mm beads as my even number. So there's 5 on there. So this is the same thing you're going to do on the bottom part of your disc. There's actually 21 of the 3mm beads down there. That can be a number that can change, certainly. Okay, that gets me my 8th one on here so that I can show you the next step here. And I'll just point out that my sample, the one I showed you at the beginning, actually has 10 on here, but I don't need you to sit through 10 beads. So now we are going to take the needle and just come back through that 2mm bead. And I'm going to pick up just one of the size 11 seed beads. I think you could substitute either size 10 or size 11 here. So I'm just putting it in between my 2mm hematite beads. Okay, so one more of these. Okay, so now to add my center on, I think we'll use a green one. I'm putting 2 of those size 11 beads plus the 3mm bead. I'm going to come through a soldered ring. So why use a soldered ring? So that your thread doesn't slip through it later and fall off your necklace. So that's a ring that won't open at all. Add 2 more of these guys. We're almost all the way across here. There's one, and then one more. So there's the hole across the top part. And there's, as I said, there's 8 of the 3mm beads. This one has 10. The number doesn't really matter. It just has to be an even number to make it work with this sitting centered. Now I've got my 2 threads together. I could just tie these 2 together, but one thing I want to do is I want to take another thread through my upper area here to make sure that this is reinforced. I'm not going to tie these or do that on camera here. I'll talk about how to add the cording here. So I'm just going to bring my cord through that, being a little careful because I know those aren't tied off. So we'll just keep it tight for now. And I'm going to match my 2 ends up. And I brought a bead that I can get both the cords in. Now, why use a bead? On this one I needed it because if I don't have the fringe on there, this is not very heavy, and I want it to hang down and not catch on everything. So putting a heavier bead on helps to keep it so that it just kind of sits right. So there's that one on there. And in this case, I actually just tied slip knots, and here's why. Because I don't know who's going to get this as a finished product, and I don't know what length they'd want it. So for now, if I just take it and I bring one cord around the other one, create a loop and then through the loop, and then same thing on the other side. Now, if that person that I'm giving this to later on says, oh, I'd prefer a clasp on it, I can just undo these knots and put a clasp on it. But at that point, I can measure it to whatever length they like it as a finished product. So there's my sliding knots. And now let's talk about the bottom. So this bottom, there's 21 of these 3mm beads here. And the reason that I have an odd number down here is because I want the fringe to be an odd number. So kind of deliberately did that. Now they're stitched on exactly the same way I was showing you on the top part. And then once I got to the point where I was ready to come back, I did leave just a little size 11 seed bead on the first one here, and I'll do the same thing on this other side. Just because I felt that they were sticking too far out, straight out, and I wanted my fringe to stick down. So I kind of opted not to put a fringe in that one. But to add the fringe on, I'm in between my 2 hematite beads, my gold hematite, and I'm going to grab some of the size 10s. Now I used size 10 here just because I picked a color up and it just happened to be the color that was in size 10. A size 11 will work here just as well. But what I'm doing is I'm picking up 15 beads onto my thread here. And then just to add a little gold in there, I'm adding the hematite. I'm grabbing one of these guys, one of the 3mm, and one more hematite. And then I put one of the laser etched daggers on the bottom here. So then I'm going to skip this dagger and go back up through all my beads. So all through all those seed beads. This is where having a long needle comes in handy, because that long needle will make it easier to go back through all those beads. Okay, so I'm just holding the bottom and pulling everything tight there. And I'm just going to stitch over to the next spot where I want to come down. So I'm going through my little gold bead there to get to the next spot where I want to come down with my fringe. So I'll keep finishing my fringe off here, and I'll show you a picture of the finished product. Have a good day.